Yeah.
Uh,
Good evening, Anupam,
yes,
and thank you for your interest in for me to be part of this bodyscape, right? What
yes,
body
yes.
hmm? bodyscape zone. And my name is Smitha Cariappa, and I'm an artist based in Bangalore. And initially my practice in the visual arts has been in painting. Then I moved into installation, and now I'm doing live art, performance art since 2002. But I would put it down as in my installations when I was doing in 1999 that I was doing so-called interactive installations which look performative.
Okay.
So basically, my practice is more in terms of painterly background I have. So visual arts in painting, which has moved into installation and now into live performance. And why I'm stressing upon painting and then into installation is simply because initially, as I said, my formative years was in painting. I was very interested to do three-dimensional works
Okay.
in a more painterly way, and that's why I got into installation, because for me installation was inhabiting space within space. And in the process of inhabiting space within space, I got into installation, and it became very site-specific also.
Okay.
And I used cloth in my work when I was doing more like more sculptural installations. And when I was using cloth, I always considered cloth as a second skin over my body.
Okay.
Right? And so when I say the second skin over my body, that made me think a lot. And I said, okay, if I'm considering it as a second skin over my body, why don't I use my body as a communicating media, as an artwork itself, rather than make objects.
As being an performance artist, how you use the body, the identity in terms of gender, sexuality, religion, caste, or any other,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah.
Right. What I would like to say that consciously, I've not made an effort to talk about caste or any kind of identity crisis with respect to using my body in performance. But in the process of doing my performance, and later when the performance is over, I've had very interesting feedbacks where people have asked me, "Oh, did you speak about women in this particular way?" But I think I do not have to make an effort to say that I'm dealing with empowerment of women and dealing with the identity of women, because I think putting myself in this space where I call it as live art, I've already feel that I have a certain level of empowerment to say things what I want to say as a woman. So I feel strong enough to voice my things. I mean my opinion, and also the kind of materials what I use. That I think I can say speaks about the gender politics, what I want to convey in the artwork. And when I say gender politics, it may be from very delicate material like wheat flour to something wheat flour or some soap bubbles to something has hard and has masculine, has the rubber tires. I consider the geopolitics, the social politics of the space where I'm working. The geopolitics, like the geographical situation where I'm actually practicing the artwork. So if I'm talking about the vulnerability of certain kinds of political issues, it's the gesture of my body and the way I more often I use silence and stillness in my work to convey. So that itself speaks in many ways. And also, very often when I use very soft and totally ephemeral materials like soap bubbles, for me, that is an emphasis on visual poetry. And the visual poetry again comes through, represents a certain kind of femininity by itself and the gentleness of it. Yeah.
So,
Well, I say when I'm not consciously, I'm conscious of the political situation, of the cultural situation in that space which I'm doing. For example, if I'm doing it in a place like Tel Aviv or in Colombo, I know the political situation in the two countries, right?
yes,
So I would use my body in such a way that it would represent the very precarious political situations they are going through. But if I'm using the same performance in a place like Santiago or even for that matter, even in Bangalore, it would be different because I would tune it in a very different way. So yeah.
Okay, you already addressed some questions now that about the props, about the material. You talks about that,
Right.
ephemeral material, very delicate material. So, kind of, what is your motivation? How you select? What is your mental state when you see a material? Okay, I can use this material in my performance. What is your mental process to know? Okay, this is my material. The process or how you conceptualize the material. You already addressed that question. That how you conceptualize. But we performance artists, we select some particular material. It's not about random material. So what is your position? How you select, or what is your motivation to select those kind of? It's a very technical kind of question. Yeah.
One, I think the material what I like to select is because I go back to the time when I was doing my very first installation. I always consider that using the material, it has to go back to nature, something that is not permanent and something that I would have to carry it along somewhere into my studios back again. So something that would disappear into the earth. So it could be simple, as I said, so bubbles itself, or using wheat flour, which finally is washed off, it's wiped away. Or even if I'm using words, the words in form of text will remain. But sometimes I've used text on the ground also. So that again is wiped off. So it is like writing a letter and rewriting it and then wiping it off, again writing and rewriting it and wiping it off. So most important element what I see in the material I use is something that is not something which I will not sort of go and I would put it this way, more something like found material.
Okay, you already.
So for for writing, if I just ask in specific, if I ask very specifically for writing, what kind of material do I use besides paper and ink and things like that? I would say I have used food materials. Food materials have always interested me, and food and different kinds of food and can be applied in different ways, and it is a metaphor for me.
Yeah, so you already talk about one word like spontaneity. So because we have seen, in performances in India or in a global context, there we can divide in a one method or in a improvisation. So the thing is that sometimes performance artists are, planned, came to the gallery or came to the space. Gallery is a wrong word, I think, in any space, So came to the space with a plan and do it. And some artists try to develop improvisation with the space. So how do you observe those, it's a binary kind of thing sometimes? And also, how do you observe that method and improvisation in the performance art? Not only your practice, as a whole performance art scenario.
Because I think improvisation I have done over a period of over 10 years. And I think it is also very challenging if you can improvise your work from what it was and how it stands in its current situation.
Yes.
Right? And with the same material, how you do it, because then it, as I spoke earlier before, sometimes you go through this improvisation using the same material but using different gestures and your body language. The way your body gestures are conveyed in stillness and silence, it speaks about the political, social, cultural situation. But at the same time, as I told you, I'm not very comfortable when improvisation is done in terms of in the stage space. You understand? In a stage space. A space like, not a gallery space, not in a white cube space, but like a theater space, okay? Because then there is this confusion that happens. Right? What I'm trying to say is, because you said generally speaking how you would look at improvisation. I think I will not touch upon that aspect. Has to say, how improvising, like different kinds of. I think I'm a little confused with this question. My answer, I'm thinking too fast. But when I say improvisation, because sometimes I think even when I use the projected images for improvisation of my work, it can read differently in one city and different in another city.
Yeah, context-wise, the meaning always changes. Yeah, that's true. But as an improvisation manner, many artists do that, and also some if we give an example, we take an example somehow there is plan, but improvisation came always because it's a life, because it's a present situation, and it's a being ephemeral. It's coming and going. So that's why my question is how do you observe those areas in the practice?
Okay, in my practice specifically, when I use the word improvisation, right, I would look at it at two different levels, 2 or 3 different levels. One level is when I've used it, as I told you, with the same material, but when I say same material, I'm talking about the wheat flour, okay? Receiving the wheat flour on my body, and then adapting different body postures and body gestures, and maintaining that stillness and silence in a particular way in different cities. Okay, that is one work which I have sort of really taken to different levels over a period of 10 years, I think, a little more than 10 years. There is the other kind of work where I have adapted text. Okay, text and poetry. And this text and poetry is something which I have written myself, the poetry which I have written myself, and I have over a period, again, in different cities and different cities, I've performed it differently according to the context. Like for texting bodies, for example, if you're telling me that. And otherwise, if it is spoken about body and politics, body, politics, and text, right? Texting body would be different, and body, politics, and text would be different.
Yeah, because in my way, or how I observe, because this is very kind of binary things, method and improvisation. We cannot say this is the method. We cannot say this is the improvisation. These are mixed always in the space and context and the time. Because, there is a word called intervention happens. Intervention is a conscious or unconscious. Someone, if you are doing in a public space, maybe unknown person came and crossed through your work. Maybe, destroy your work. He don't know about anything. So these are so you started improvising, suddenly someone stole your material. Just I'm, in a funny way giving the example. Right. But these things happen in a public spaces mostly, not in like a very compact, selected audience.
Yeah, no, because that's the reason I said I enjoy, and I put these interactive performances more in public spaces and not in private spaces. I would put it down in two categories: private space and public space. Public space is where the unexpected things happen, right? It could be on the street, it can be on the flyover, under the flyover. It can be in important city junctions, traffic junctions, where the unexpected things happen, and the materials can be used by the people even without any directions given to them, and a lot of unexpected, and it gives a new introspection into the artwork itself, right?
Yes, yes.
And it's also something that is immediate, no? It is not already choreographed, right? Because there are certain things that, see, when you use a lot of text, okay, I would speak on my behalf, okay? If you're using, like, as I mentioned, if I'm going to use a lot of text and poetry and do it in public space, I don't think I will get the best reaction to my artwork, right? What I'm doing, because one, it would be the problem of language, no? It depends how much can you, and also considering what kind of a space you're doing it. Is it a noisy space or is it a quiet space? If it's a quiet space, it's okay. But if it's a noisy space, do you have a voice for it? Do you have, your audio is it clear? Can people hear? So you have to sort of engage yourself in such a way where you can capture the actions, capture the attention of the people, of the passers-by.
Whatever in the art form, like in a poetry, movies, performance art, painting, sculpture, there is always abstraction is there. Even in the realism, there is a abstraction. So how do you see abstraction in performance art? This is like very my query to know about. Actually, I am very curious actually, because when the performance art happening, it's a very kind of, many of performance art is very direct political action. But when we talk about art, the terminology use art because it's a performance art. When arts came, always abstraction will came. So how do you see that actually, abstraction in performance art?
Is it okay, Anupam, if I say something? Like, I would like to use the word minimalism and conceptualism rather than abstract in performance. And with reference, I would talk it only at my personal level. I feel it is more like minimalism. Okay, when I use minimalism, it is not only with respect to use the minimum materials. Like, materials is one part of the performance, right? But when addressing only materials, I would say it would be very, very minimum. That would address the context directly and straightforward. And it is a direct metaphor, okay? And also the actions, what you do, right? You do not have to actually do an action also, but the very body gesture, what you do, and you're maintaining that silence, or you're just giving out a certain kind of vocal thing, that becomes minimal as well. Okay, that's one side I look at it. There is the other kind of conceptually looking at it also. I find it also, performance art can be very conceptual, right?
Yes, that's true. In the same way, like, we talk about your work. Also, I would like to know about the performance art in India, because we know there are many cities, making events, developing performance, like in Bangalore, like Kolkata, there is Kipa, like Chandigarh, there is a Morning Hills Performance Art Vinala. In Goa also there is before is a heritage place. These are the major cities we can observe. And also you were one of the curator in KIPAF as well before. So how do you observe, the as a whole Indian performance art scene? What kind of possibilities or
Okay.
yeah?
Okay. I just like to say,
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be a little off track a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When I say that, it's because I just like to say because I think in India the performance art scene came
Mm-hmm.
after installation, right?
Okay.
After
Yeah.
installation was a major part in the Indian art world for a long time, and then performance was really recognized. And I think that came about sometime late in the. I mean, we don't really know very much of the works done by Bhupin Kakkar and works done by what's his name? I forget his name. We don't know about that. Okay, these are some of the scattered images that are there in the 1980s and late 1980s. Okay, and afterwards we have people like Ratnabali Kant who has sort of done some performances, but then it is questionable also. But she was one of the early female artists who did performance art, right? Ratnabali Kant, and then also there is also Suresh. Suresh, what is his name? Inder and
Sushil.
Sushil Kumar. Sushil Kumar's work are some very strong performances, which I like what he has done. And Sushil Kumar's work and Inder Salim's work, which are pretty early works for that scene, right? All these works were in the late 90s and early 2000s. Right? And then I think it's interesting. This is my perspective as a Bangalorean. I think the experimental art scene in Bangalore has always been very strong, and so it always encouraged people to use new media, use installations, do performance in a very collective way, and though individually, but still it was done in a very many practitioners were there in Bangalore. And what I realized when I was traveling abroad is a lot of these performance art festivals was always organized by artists, artists for artists. So for me, that was very encouraging because the chief organizer or the curator, whatever you may call, has always been an artist. And there is always that very interesting one-to-one feeling in that residency for performance art. And in performance art, the feeling is much more stronger about this. So the networking and feeling like the performance artists are one big family. So that is one point I want to sort of really say is very strong among performance art. Both, I would say, it is in India as well as overseas.
Also, can you talk about the comments, now, like, okay, now, how you see?
Okay. No, why I'm saying this is, I think all these festivals, whether it is the festivals in Bangalore or the festival in Calcutta, Kipa, it sort of gave a base for a lot of other artists to practice performance. But also at the same time, what I have been sort of looking at it in a rather my observations is sort of to say sometimes some artists take it too easy and say, oh, even I can do performance, and they just step into performance, right? Which is not really understood, because I feel it's always when you have to learn the basics in art, and then you undo art, right? You undo whatever you have learned. So it is the same way when you do your performances. Finally, your background as a painter or your background as a sculptor is reflected. Or if your background is in theatre also, it is reflected in performance art, right? But then very often I feel some artists, they just sort of just jump into the performance art wagon and say, oh, I can also do performance, and they do it. And that becomes a little bit of a tamasha. I'm using the Indian word of, it's a gimmick then. And that becomes a little annoying.
Mhm.
And in the current art scenario, I also like this whole idea that we had some very serious residential performance art practices that's happening in Morni Hills in Chandigarh
Mhm.
and Hathadji, as well as what is happening in Goa
Mhm.
also that base, which is very interesting.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it's also very interesting that a lot of collectives in Bangalore have sort of really projected that artists as a community can do a lot of things for the
Mhm.
artists. Yeah.
Would you like to
Yeah,
say
because
something
yeah,
related to
happy
art?
very much for the no, very much for today. I have a question for all of us. See,
Mhm.
now we have got into social distancing is there. We cannot travel. These
Mhm.
were some of the things what most performance artists, live artists enjoyed. Right? As artists, we enjoy doing things. We
Mhm.
were able to have a free go with our artwork by traveling, like moving around with our artwork.
Mhm.
But with the restrictions today,
Mhm.
we are also making ways for doing live art in a virtual way.
Mhm.
But my question is still like, if when we do it virtual, how do we rephrase performance?
Mhm.
How do we rephrase the term live art? And what are the challenges we are going to have as artists
Mhm.
who are practicing live art in the future? If they, I know, because I think for a long time we will not be having these great, interesting performance art platforms and festivals, right? So
Mhm.
what do we do for it? What is the future going to be?
Yeah, that's.
This is my question to you. My question, because see, these interviews are fine. We have these interviews. We go on Zoom. We interact with people
Mhm.
on the internet. All that, but then how do
Mhm.
we address the whole situation as live art? Because for me, that is still a problem because it does not become live art. It still becomes a virtual art form. So do we change the terminology? How do we address it?
Yeah, so it's first of all, it's a situation.
Yeah.
It's a situation demand. So
Mm.
rather addressing performance art or live art, I think the artists who are doing virtually, they're using the situation and using the available platform. If if like suddenly, as for example, 2 3 days before some ideas came, but I could not able to do it
Mm.
because I always prefer public spaces. I always
Mm.
prefer audience in
Mm.
terms of it may be my friend or it
Mm.
may be unknown people. It's not, I'm not categorize it, but as a
Mm.
viewer.
Mm.
So I thought of doing it by holding a camera or being
Mm.
live on the social platform, but I could not able to do it. But some
Mm.
people
Mm.
doing it because they are
Yeah.
able to do it.
Yeah.
So this is the question. It's performance art. It's live art. That I don't know, but it's like a situation. Artists are using the platform, using the
Mm.
situation
Mm. Mm.
in that
No,
way.
that because I've already no because why I put this on this discussion is because
Mhm.
I've already used the camera. I've
Mhm.
already as I told you, no, because I wanted to use it as an extreme to magnify the performance. I've used a video camera. Like the camera is projected in my live performances also, right?
Mhm.
So you see me live and you still see me in the live performance, right? As a
Mhm.
projected element. So now we are back. I mean, I'm back to the square one where I'm front of the camera and I'm performing front of the camera, which I've already done in the past, and I try to get out of it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So that's the reason. Because then we'll have to be addressing more like video art and video performance art, right? Performance video art, right?
Mhm.
So, so that's
Yeah, that's the point. I think, camera is came somehow, we need the documentation as well, you know, like,
Yeah.
Sushil Kumar said he don't want documentation. He don't like to be documented his
Yeah.
performance. But somehow, it's for the research material, it's for the archive material. And that's why in today's conversation, we are struggling with the, recorded option. So we need to, it's not for only one-to-one comparison. It's like you address the question, it's like a family already you address. So yeah, everything should be shareable. So that's why, yeah, the documentation part or using the camera is important
No,
for me.
yeah, but no, when I said performance, what I was talking about the works, that itself was the artwork itself.
Yes.
The performative aspect of documentation was the artwork itself because it was self-documented. But as you put that, like some artists do not like the works to be documented. That is another level of discussion, and which is very important because do you want it? Because performance art by itself is ephemeral. Why do you want the documentation, right?
Yes.
But then it is for art history and it is for archiving, as you've already answered. No? So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, I think.
Thank you, Anupam. Thank you so much for your interest. Thank you so much for your interest. Thank you so much.